Okay, so let's get started. Are there any questions or thoughts from the first part that are sitting with people? No? Okay. So just being a non-violent parent is not enough, yeah? Because you may not be the person who's doing the hitting or the person who's responsible for what's going on, but just simply bowling up and being that is, well, it's important and it's a start, but if we're thinking about working with traumatised children and supporting them through this experience, it's not enough. So we need to support these parents, and this is where, I know this might sound slightly controversial, but if I only had so much money, yeah, I would not be seeing the kids. I would be seeing the parent. For all of the reasons that I've just spent, an hour justifying. And that's not because one-on-one work with the children isn't vitally important, because absolutely, of course it is. But if we're thinking about good bang for your buck, sorry to put it bluntly, but also about sustainability and also about, this actually creating health within families, this is the space that we need to put our resources into. Yeah? Have I said that firmly enough? Good. Right. So these parents need to be supported to keep themselves and their children physically safe with support. Because of course we've talked about the fact that a lot of safety is an internal sense, but clearly we're not going to even go near internal safety if external safety is not present. So those basics are really, really important. We need to support parents to try and keep calm-ish. Yeah? Because I think often, again, even our languaging, because if we roll out standard Triple P, and Triple P is great, Incredible Years, fantastic. This is all really good resourcing, yeah? But if you're trying to roll out a standard parenting program that has an expectation around this person having resources spare to roll into doing this kind of stuff, then you've lost your audience already. If you're going to ask them to do handouts and fill in their homework, you've lost them already. It's about taking those principles, which are really, really sound and solid, and no matter which way you dress them up, they remain sound and solid, but we need to know those principles as a worker enough so that we can adjust how we talk about those principles in a way that the person in front of us can hear. Yeah? And that's why I'm such an advocate for people being a little bit specialist in doing parenting work, and family work. Because I think often what happens is we've got people who are practitioners in adult work who happen to, parenting might come up as an issue or kids might come up as an issue, so we might try and kind of, do a little bit of that work on the side. Or we've got child clinicians who end up doing some parent work. And all of those things are really helpful ways into this piece of work. But I think it is also then about having some specialist support, some training around how to do this piece of work, which is how do you support and resource a parent to be present for their child who might be traumatised. Does that make sense? Yeah. And of course, these little traumatised kids grow up. And so if you work with adults, they're probably going to be your clients. And what happens when we do adult work is we often forget the family system that these people grow up in. If you've got a little 8-year-old turning up, you can't help but recognise that they exist within a system. If you've got a 38-year-old turning up, what we tend to look at is them. And we don't tend to ask around, well, hopefully we might ask around their current system, but we often don't ask about their system in terms of growing up. Yeah? And I think if we think about some of that resistance we can have as professionals, I know a colleague of mine used to work in the child and family area, and she's just gone to work for corrections. And she said one of the most powerful things she's taken with her from working in child and family to working into corrections is her remembering that these kids were also once just little kids who were hurt and not kept safe. Now that does not excuse the behaviour they've just done, and we certainly need to manage that, but we need to find that compassion, we need to find that lens to look through these, look at these kids through. So keeping calm, really important. And as I told you my midwife story, that's what I'm getting at. Our brains have this little thing called a mirror neuron, or mirror neurons. Have anyone heard about that? It's kind of magical. Because really what it says is that there's a little part in your brain that is checking out how someone else is reacting, and it kind of mirrors that reaction. Yeah? So if a child or a parent is freaking out and we stay calm, not only does that help us think and react and talk, that's all good, but there'll be something about us being calm that is going to be connecting to a part of that person's brain and helping them start to regulate. Because if I'm looking at you and you're not freaking out, then there's something telling me that this situation is safer than I thought it was.
Just to that thing. So you've got a parent who's disorganised, you know, they're violent, they're chaotic, they're loud, and so you have a child that's like that. What therapies can we do with the parents to help calm the parents down so we help the children?
This is the stuff.
But is there any particular, like, okay, I see you, they're going to their own therapy, but is there any other therapies?
I mean, I think that depending on what's going on for the parent, if they've got their own trauma, if they've got their own, so getting them into their own trauma work can be really helpful to regulate them. I think, working around, and again, part of this is resourcing around what's available. But ironically, just being a calm person with that parent and working through some of these things can actually have a really powerful influence as well. Now, I'm not saying it's a magical fix, but it's about actually, if we can be that person with that parent and be a calming, regulating influence, then we're modelling for them what it feels like to actually be distressed and then to be able to calm down again, to be able to think again. And the amount of times we can mirror and repeat that with them, the better it is for them. And that might mean that if they find it quite hard to generalise, it might mean that you're doing that in the home. I don't know what organisation you work for, but for a lot of these clients, in fact, they're not at the stage for wanting therapy or even being in the space for therapy. What they're actually needing is just practical help to do life. And if that practical help to do life can be done in this kind of way, then that's actually more powerful than therapy.
I was with the integrated safety response, so I sit at safety.
Yeah.
So I read the police reports of family violence. And we've got lots of children, 7, 8, 9, whatever, who have got some really awful violent behaviours themselves.
Yep.
And then every time we go in and we hear about the parents and not helping because they're inflaming the situation. So maybe like MST or functional family therapy or something like that might be what needed.
Absolutely, it might be, but I suppose the whole reason for my talk today is that whatever role you end up have in that family's life, even if you're seeing them written down on a piece of paper, I think the challenge is that how do we understand what they're not helping, why they might not be helping the situation? Because it's really easy to step on one side and go, well, they're not helping it because they're choosing not to. Whereas sometimes actually the warm-up for those families might need to be that we have less people involved, but they stay involved for longer. Or they have some patience for a bit of this stuff happening. Or they have that capacity to be able to home visit. Or they might actually take them off to the GP, because in fact what I need is my antidepressant medication, or I need to have I'm so worried about my child and their health that I can't focus on actually the fact that we're talking about some lessons I'm supposed to learn today. So if you actually took me and help me manage that situation, then in fact that's going to regulate me more than sitting in a therapy room. So that's what we mean about having to have that, the individualised package for that particular family. And do not forget, which again is the reason why I've been banging on about attachment, is that we are really powerful in that. Because if we're sitting in that room and we are calm and we are sitting with them in their pain or in their distress, and we're regulating them through our behaviour, then they have an experience of a professional being a safe person. And that's actually really powerful. It doesn't mean they'll remember it, it doesn't mean that they'll seek you out next time, but actually even in those moment-to moments, there can be some successes. Yeah? So we need to have a plan, and with that in mind. So if you've got parents who are unsafe or who kick off or who get really angry, then again, often as organisations we can say, right, well, let's put the wall up and protect everybody. But sometimes it's actually how do we work with that parent to know that what are their high risk situations, where can we meet with them, and how can we meet with them in ways that they can tolerate and be calm, and maybe it's short meetings frequently, or it's meetings in certain environments that are more likely to have them being calm and collected. So it's us being able to think outside the square. For some, actually, to be regulated might mean they meet at the same time, in the same office, same back channel, because that's actually, that external structure becomes really, really important. And the idea of you coming into their home would freak the hell out of them. Because they're thinking, actually, I don't want you to see how I live. I don't want you to judge me, because I've been judged by lots of other people before. So that's what I mean about that individual response, engaging what's going to be helpful for them by asking them often. And that plan has to be realistic for them and for their children. Again, if we're up this end saying that we think safety looks like this, but in fact they're back here, then how the hell are they ever going to engage with us if they know this is our goals? So how often do we have those conversations realistically about what they're able to do? Because you know yourself, I mean, if I had to turn up to work every day and put on my ballet shoes and get up and pirouette, I'd be calling in sick. You know, I'd start to be a little bit not engaged, because I would know that I didn't have the skills to be able to do what you're asking me to do. And that's where sometimes we have to take that moment, lots of moments, to actually slow down enough to engage with what they're actually capable of doing. They need to take care of themselves, as said, you know, including their own therapy if needed. But again, we're not rushing there, because if in fact they are just in survival mode, there's a lot of research to say that if someone's in survival mode, they're not doing the thinking required that is about processing trauma. They actually just need to be allowed to be and be kept safe being. We want to support them to let in the positive influences, because for a lot of our clients, and probably us included, we're pretty good at listening to the negatives. We're pretty good at being on alert. How often do we actually let in people giving us praise? And in fact, as professionals, how often do we give it? Now, I hope it's lots. Yeah? But sometimes, if our goals are out here and our clients are never going to get those, even if we're saying, hey, good job, there's lots of other messages they get that it's actually not such a good job. They haven't done enough. Yeah? So plan time out rather than a reaction to a crisis is really important. Because again, parents might go, I'll be fine, it'll be okay, we'll do it. And you might go, okay, well, let's be positive. But in fact, they were never going to do it. You know, you've got a live wire kid, you've got a parent who's got self-regulation difficulties, lack of support. They were never going to do it on a sustained basis. So we actually need to put in those resources and supports from the outset so that in fact we're maximising the likelihood that this is going to go well. Parents need to have an understanding of the impacts of family violence on themselves and on their children, and be supported with the ripple effects of that. So, how helpful, well, what might be the impacts of a parent learning about the impacts of family violence on their kids? What are the upsides of that information for them? So that might open up the options for and aspire to do something different. Yeah, they might understand what they're seeing. They might have seen their kid as being just a little shit, and you know they're just making my life miserable. And I'm trying, and they're just not seeing it. So if I'm able to provide some context around that child to say, actually, do you know what? They probably find it really hard to manage those big feelings. They've been scared. You know, all of those sorts of things. Often what we're doing is we're reframing what that parent might be seeing. More awareness, absolutely. Yeah, new perspectives. What might be the downside to providing those new perspectives? Guilt. Shame. Because as a parent, if I can kind of go, they're just like their father, and you know it's their fault, and kind of then there's a little part of me that can stay a bit safe, because this has got nothing to do with me. Whereas we've got to walk that line of providing them information around the impacts, while also holding them with what that feels like. Does that make sense? Yeah. So knowing a bit about trauma and how it might influence their child's behaviour and what they might do about it. And this comes back to the importance of being calm. So if you're a parent who feels completely overwhelmed most of the time, and the thing you take away from a session with whoever you're working with is actually if you stay calm, everything is going to go a little bit better. Now that might be the only thing you need to hear. But what do we tend to do as professionals? We don't stop there, do we? We put a few other things on their to-do list. Yeah, and when do people stop listening? Absolutely, because that's our kind of, and again, this is not a finger-pointing exercise. We've got, outcome measures, we've got things that we need to be doing, and it all makes sense. But I suppose my challenge to us is to go, whose purpose is that serving? Because in fact, if our list of things that they're working on is this long, and they were only ever going to get this, then having this many other things on their list, what is that likely to make them feel like? Overwhelmed and pretty disheartened, hey? So sometimes we need to signal that in fact, if the only thing you did was stay calm for an extra few minutes and get yourself into your room and close the door, awesome. That's what we needed you to do. And get on the phone to your neighbour or someone who can come in and just be with the kid. It's about really small steps. Because then what do they get the experience of? They're more likely to have an experience of that being successful. Yeah? Be present enough to notice and support their child's emotional needs. So again, how do we help them understand enough about what's going on for them that when their child is losing it or their child might be sending them signals, actually they're paying attention? How do they get more present? And that's so, so important. And if you've grown up with a view that what you do is not important and who you are is not important, then as someone who's supporting that parent, a big part of corrective information we need to give them is some of the stuff we've been talking about today. Because often these parents need to be reminded of just how bloody vital they actually are. And so they can sit there with that big guilt stick saying, well, I should have kept them safe and I should have this and I should have that and I can't kind of move on from that. We need to acknowledge and empathise with that, but we also need to say, hey, but guess what? You're that powerful. So if we can harness some of that and even change one or two little things, then imagine the impact that's going to have for your babies. Because if they're looking to someone else to kind of solve this problem, in fact, we're reminding them that some of that power for change actually sits within them, and that can feel pretty empowering. So really, to set clear and predictable boundaries, as this helps a sense of safety, and again, we all know that stuff. And I think often what we underestimate is that for a lot of these parents, they actually don't know Parenting 101. And we've leapt over here to let's support your child around trauma. But in fact, they don't even know how to get their kids to bed. Because that's actually not something they've never actually felt safe enough to learn or been exposed to. So again, that individually working with parents becomes really important. I know post-earthquake, we went out to schools and did some information around dealing with traumatised kids post-earthquake. And what we were confronted by were parents who actually had some really big gaps in terms of their basic parenting. Now that's not a judgment, it was just really important information for us because we were gauging things and setting things here, whereas in actual fact they were here. So we had to start back here, we had to adjust our perspective, we had to adjust the work that we were doing. And I think often what we end up doing is say, we've got a bloody good program and people just need to come to it and get the most out of it because we're not going to change our program. I see some smiling there. How often do we do that? We've put lots of effort into developing a program and we expect people to fit into it. Yeah. And again, most of those programs are going to be absolutely great. But sometimes the emphasis is put on you need to fit into us rather than us being able to adjust to fit into you. And catch them succeeding, even if it's just for a moment. Because this is starting with the basics. And again, people might go, well, if the amount of time I'm spending with this parent, I'm not spending on the child. Yeah, so if someone was to use that argument against you, or, and challenge to you, what might you say based on our conversation today?
Working with the parent is actually empowering them to create a safe space for that child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in other words, clinical attention and resources need to be focused on the non-violent parent because they are able to be a more effective regulating influence on their child. This is not about ignoring the child, but building up the key relationship where the child has the potential of having their needs met. So work with the child and their thoughts and feelings can be really, really important, but again, they need to feel safe. And the best way they can feel safe is with the adults around them. And here's something which might be slightly controversial, given that this program's called Keeping Yourself Safe. But I personally don't believe it's the child's job to keep themselves safe or to fix themselves. And so when we used to have kids, when I worked at Whakatata House, being dropped off basically to say, can you just fix them up? And we'll pick them up in an hour. Yeah? Or we have had taxis dropping off at start saying, you know, and again, sometimes that's needed given that family circumstance. But what we say, one of our criteria for start is actually unless you have an adult who's able to engage in this work with you, that's not going to be helpful. Yeah? So how can you be a regulating influence when the parent is distressed? So one of the most useful ways of learning is clearly having this stuff modelled. So remember, as I was saying before, when you're working with that parent whose alarm system is firing, you're actually wanting them to learn. And if they're firing off in terms of their alarm system, how much are they actually learning? So if you think about a colleague or you know, the approach you might take to this stuff, sometimes what we're actually having to do is spend a hell of a long time engaging with people and settling them into being where they need to be and how they feel safe. That is not wasted time. Yeah? Whereas sometimes we can think if we don't get straight to the contents and the nitty-gritty, then in fact we're not going to get through what we need to get through in the hour. If you don't get through what you needed to get through in the hour, it was too much. We probably need to halve it and then halve it again. Yeah? Because in fact the most powerful thing you can do is be a regulating influence, to be a human being in relationship to that parent, because we're wanting them to do that for their kids. And for a lot of these parents, that's the first, not the first, potentially one of the first experiences they might have of someone taking time and being present with them. And remember, even if they look calm, they probably aren't. If you go in for your performance review at work, yeah? Or think back to a moment where you felt like, or the police pull you over because you were going slightly fast. Yeah? When we're in a high-risk situation, and we might look completely calm and collected, what's often going on the inside? And we might be a really kind, caring, fantastic, supportive person. But remember, the person sitting opposite you might have had what was supposed to be a kind, caring, supportive person as a parent who then hurt them. Yeah? So let's not forget that kind, caring support isn't always experienced by that other person as kind and caring and safe. So we can actually be often triggering a response in someone through our kindness. Now, I'm not saying stop being kind, but what I'm saying is that we can assume that just because I'm being a good person, that other person experiences me as a good person. We just have to take time and for them to feel safe enough to be able to explore some of this stuff. And remember, with the window of tolerance, sometimes hypoarousal can look like I'm bored and I'm not particularly interested. It might actually be I'm so freaked out that in fact I've left the building. Not physically, but psychologically. Now this sounds basic, yeah? But science is backing up. So going back to your question of what do we need to do with a really dysregulated parent, it's this stuff. Because our main task, same with a dysregulated kid, is to get them calm enough to start thinking. You know, so we want to be calm ourselves. We want to have a plan. We want to encourage them to take slow, deep breaths. Whoever said that? Breathing's really, really important. We want to use simple and concise language. Drop a few syllables. We want to validate their experience. And that's not head patting going, oh, you poor sausage. But saying this is bloody hard, isn't it? I can just imagine what it must feel like coming in and we have a poke and prod around your family, hey? That must feel really difficult. Because imagine that. Most of us, what happens in our family happens behind closed doors and no one gets to have a poke and prod around it. But for these families, that door got whipped open, and for a really good reason. But it wasn't to give us a high five and say you're doing a good job, was it? Yeah, it was police involvement, or it was, your kids aren't safe. So you want to talk to them about what's happening around them, what's going to be happening in the session today. Because when we know what's about to happen, we calm down. The brain loves a plan, even if it's a stupid plan. Our brain just calms down when it's got a plan and it knows what's happening next. We want to give the person opportunities to make simple decisions. And in fact, keep in mind that for some of our clients, they may actually not know how to make decisions. They may actually need some support in weighing up decisions and weighing up information and breaking things down. And this is not to imply that they're stupid. So I'm not being disrespectful here. But if we're under that much pressure and stress, our cognitive functioning is actually, impacted on. So sometimes we actually need to have a calm enough space to be able to break information down, to be able to talk this stuff through. And where we can fall down as professionals is we think, well, there's an adult sitting opposite me, and they're nodding. So clearly they understand what I'm talking about. That's a dangerous assumption. Yeah? And that's where questioning and wondering and collaborating around what your goals are and what's happening in the room is really important, because actually they might not have a bloody clue. One of their survival behaviours might have just been to smile and nod, because that mostly makes professionals go away. Yeah? We want to validate and notice what they're doing well, because often they don't. And we want to instill hope. Hold the hope. Often that's the job that we're doing. Again, all of those things around how to help down-regulate the stress response. Now, Blair sent this through, which I thought was really interesting, and I hadn't seen it before, and the website is up there. But the 6 R's of trauma-informed education, which kind of fits in with a lot of what we're talking about. So we want to be in relationship with, we want the information to be relevant, it needs to be repetitive, because remember, they're not taking in half of what's being said anyway because of their high levels of arousal. It needs to be positive, rewarding. The rhythmic is, I suppose, again, linking with body-brain arousal, is that sometimes actually what people are able to take in and listen to, then, there's a whole lot of literature around actually therapies, doing dance therapy and drum therapy and other bits and pieces, because there's something really primal about rhythms and how that helps calm the system down. Now, I'm not saying you get out the drum, but that might be your thing. But if you think about other ways in which you can create rhythm in terms of your voice or in terms of what's happening, get creative and clearly to be respectful. And this is very similar, I suppose, to the people might have heard of trauma-informed care. It's a new buzzword, alongside bespoke. And these are the principles of trauma-informed care. We want to help create safety. We want to be acting in a trustworthy way and be experienced as trustworthy. We want to offer choice, collaboration, and empowerment. And so again, if as an organisation, as a clinician, we're thinking about, is this how I enact and I am with these parents, that is certainly going to maximise and improve the capacity that they have to be in this way with their kids. Okay. So, I'm actually going to be a pain, because we're actually not that big a group, and you're all in my power, so you have to do what I say, because I've got the microphone, can we just take a once round, and can people identify, I know there's some worried looks now, one thing that you might take away from today's talk that might influence what you do, or something you might do differently, or just keep in mind as a result of just this conversation around the importance of attachment in relationships. Who wants to start? Go on, get it over and done with. Because you get the easy ones, because anyone else has to go think of something different.
The mirror neurons being
Yep.
calm.
Yep, it works.
Keep the plan simple.
Absolutely. Keep the plan simple. Because often when it's complicated, there are other agendas in the room, and they're not going to help the client in front of you.
Modelling
Modelling, yep. So how we are with that person is one of the most powerful ways that we can then influence how they might then be with their kids.
Growing your window of tolerance.
Yep, growing your window of tolerance. Yep, that's for ourselves as well. Yeah, yeah.
I think just keeping my empathy in check and not going back to the sympathy, which can fall into the trap of.
And what would be the clues that you're slipping into sympathy? Sorry, I didn't mean to say I'd ask another question. Made it all complicated.
I just think, oh, poor you, yeah.
Yeah.
You get a bit fatigued though, don't you?
Because we then start to take responsibility, don't we? And that's not helpful. Yeah, it's a really,
We've got to empower.
it's a really good point. Yeah, we go into rescue mode, hey? And then when they let us down, I'm being a bit provocative there, we can then feel personally hurt, hey? Because we're thinking, well, I put all this into you and, you know, it was looking good, but how come it's all gone downhill? So again, we get too invested, don't we? Yeah.
I think giving more attention to the fact that they're the break of trust, that they're the part of the break of trust. Just keep remembering that we have no idea how many times they've been approached,
Yep.
really.
Yep.
And how many times they've been let down by these previous encounters.
Yep.
And taking that on board and making sure that actually we can't, however long it takes, don't be that person to let them down again.
Yeah. And I think what's really important part of that is to be transparent about that, because I think often the clients that we work with, they are exquisite readers of a room. Yeah? So if you look a bit bored or a bit tired or a bit pissed off or a bit whatever, they will pick it up just like that. But what they're not good at is interpreting it accurately. Yeah? Because typically what they're interpreting is that it's something about them. So if you look a bit tired, well, clearly I'm boring. Or clearly there's something wrong with me. You know, I can't even keep my therapist who's there to really help me entertained.
We're both going to judge with assumptions.
That's exactly right. And so sometimes our role can be to make those assumptions really overt and just to kind of drop and run and say, look, you know, I imagine I'm one of many, hey? And so what are the clues? What do you need from me to help this feel like a safer relationship? And what are the clues if this starts to feel like it's going down that track? You know, so to be overt and name those elephants in the room can be really, really helpful.
And letting them take the lead.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's part of how do we continue to be reflective practitioners, hey, in terms of what are the things driving us? Of tolerance. Yeah, yeah. And remember, your guys were once little.
Meeting them at where they are, the families, you know, a lot of times we try to make them fit in our programs, and our programs are written for funders and educated people, but doesn't relate and relevant to a client that we are dealing with.
Absolutely.
So it's really about making it simple for our people that we are working with.
And making it more likely to be successful, because if you're engaging them, then they get to do the hard work and we can rest on our laurels. Yeah, very true.
The different types of attachment styles, and something I knew, but that some type of attachment style, even if it's the wrong one, is better than none. And working in the military, relationships are very much like family relationships, and the military's first response when anything happens is to take that person and put them in barracks, or take that person and come back to New Zealand. It's something that happened in on deployment.
and again, it often is more complicated because we have to kind of hang around and be a bit more aware. But from a longevity or from a long-term point of view, it's going to potentially, again, we're not going to tolerate risk. You know, if things remaining dangerous, absolutely, we need to create some space. But sometimes if that's our default response, then we miss the opportunity to maximise what might be there in that system. One more? Anyone else?
Trauma and re-traumatisation.
Mm.
For example, post-quakes, our children, parents were severely traumatised, but then we had to contend with aftershocks, which would re-traumatise. And it became a normalisation for a lot of people. And then the afterquakes got further and further apart, but then we do get another one, and the trauma comes back again. So just be very mindful of that.
Absolutely. So again, one way that can be really helpful is if you're thinking about your family living with family violence, they're living with some earthquakes, eh? So it may just be a look, or it may just be a tone of voice, or it may just be walking into an office with an official looking person there and it's another little aftershock. And we might not even be aware that they've had the big, 7-point way back when. So it's an interesting thing to keep in mind, hey? Hey, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully there's been some relevance there for you. And again, as I said before, START is open in terms of for consults or conversations or questions. So if there's anything in particular that's come out today that you want to know some more about, or if there's any specific questions to do with sexual violence in relation to the domestic, the family violence kind of forum, just let us know.
We are going to carry on with a panel at 3:30. I know that some people are needing to go. There's a few people that have had to do kids pick up or get back to work for some urgent things at the end of the day. So if you can stay, please do. We'll be coming back in here at 3:30. We will be finishing by 4, definitely. And thank you again, Catherine, for your time and the work you put into this presentation. I know you are incredibly hectic, and the work that you do at START is incredible. We'll finish there and see you back here in about 10 minutes. Just as you're walking out, I'll let you know that we can email that presentation. So